We have the stream active now too. Thanks to all of you who are around. Thanks to you who the streams. Pray that you've had a great day in the Lord. Isaiah 47, and we're looking at this scenario. It says, "Thou that art given to pleasures." Thou that art given to pleasures. It is an interesting state of affairs when we look at our society, and we talked very briefly about this morning, but it is a very interesting situation. We have a political race coming up in November, and I generally wouldn't mention politics too much, except for that it is currently a major issue. At least today there was some breaking news right around a little after 1 o'clock, I believe, and that news was simply this, that one of the presidential candidates, President Joe Biden, has backed out of the election. And so the Democrats will have to choose a new candidate to run against Donald Trump. So it's a lot of chaos going on in our society right now. There's a lot of confusion. People are wondering what's really important in life. You know, this afternoon I spent not a ton of time, but a decent amount of time responding to an individual who was telling me that the letter J did not exist until like the 1500s. It was a lot of stuff about wording and semantics. But in the end of it all, his conclusion was very simple. He's concluded what a lot of people conclude, and it's basically that Jesus Christ didn't matter. And the reality this evening is, if that becomes your conclusion, if the end of your conclusion about your life is simply that Jesus Christ doesn't exist or doesn't work, then you're going to have exactly what happened in Babylon and is happening in America today. In Isaiah chapter 47, we're going to read verse number 6, and then we'll move from there. Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 6, and here's what it says. It says, "I was wroth with my people. I have polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy. Upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke." This is the interesting result of God's judgment. We talked this morning about the fact that when you live in sin, that it's not vengeance being taken by man, it's vengeance being taken by God. And so God sends Babylon as a judgment. You know, America has an amazing history. It's really very much so a religious upbringing. You go back to the very beginning, and we've talked about it before. You know, George Washington and his prayer in Valley Forge being one of the most famous things that you see about George Washington. Abraham Lincoln, of course, being president during the Civil War. But one of the things that people often say, and it's still a phrase today, is Honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln was known as a man of honesty, a man of integrity. Those were marks that marked a lot of the original colonials. And so it's not all that surprising that the setup for the government and things was based around freedom and liberty and the pursuit of God. And so we had a lot of peace, and there was a lot of joy. The America flourished. They were helped along by God so often. And now we come into the situation where we're at now, far, far into the future from there, further than those individuals that were setting up the Declaration of Independence and setting up the Constitution and and all those things could have ever seen that America would still be in existence 250 years nearly ago, now just being over 248 years since that time. When they were doing things then, I'm sure they didn't have 250 years in the future. But what has happened in America is that it's become largely like Babylon, we've been able to overcome the different challenges. The original colonials got together, and the colonists were able to fend off the British Army, and they would declare their independence, and here they are. 13 colonies set up a government, and things began to expand. Of course, there was the War of 1812, and we recognize that from the fact that the original White House was burned during a war with Britain, and there was the Battle of Fort McHenry, which is most well known because of the fact that the Star-Spangled Banner was actually wrote during that battle. Francis Scott Key and the Boston Harbor, as they fought against Fort McHenry, would write that song. We have all of these things. America's been able to conquer that. They were able to win battle after battle against the Native Americans as they began to expand west and take territory. And of course now we know after they purchased Alaska for 2 cents an acre. And so now we have 50 states. We've been blessed beyond measure. America has been known for a long time as being the strongest military power and the richest nation in the world. And of course we know that because if you live in America, you will have more pleasures and more things than almost anywhere in the world. I know my wife's mom is a massive fan of coffee. She loves her coffee. But remember Brother Simmons, and my wife and her mom may remember, but Brother Simmons was talking about the coffee that they got in Brazil was far different. As he would go to the different places and visit, you had to have coffee. And they get their water out of the Amazon River where they do everything else. They wash and clean their cattle and do everything, and they get their water as well out of that. And they put it on the stove, but it's very strong coffee inside, so it only takes, even though they're extremely small cups, it doesn't take very long. It's like a shot of Java almost. You get a couple of those and you're already jittery and everything else. They're really strong. But we have everything you can practically imagine in America. You can go to the store and buy just about anything. You know, I mean, every now and then something will be out of stock, but if you want to go buy some hamburger, it's no problem. You go down to the store and you have it. You want to buy a turkey or sausage or bacon or chicken or whatever it is that you wish to buy, a roast beef, it'll likely be right down at the store. You will have all kinds of items to choose from. Just about any vegetable that you want, for the most part, will be there. There'll be almost any hardware thing you can imagine. When people come to America, Walmart is a fascinating thing to them. To have a store like that where just everything is there. Where in most countries they're going to the market, and if you want a lot of the things that we find in America, you probably won't even be able to find it there. We have everything just like Babylon did. They had overcome everything. They had laid the ancient yoke down. They had been the conqueror. They had been the one that had came out on top. In Isaiah 47 and verse 7, and thou sayest, I shall be a later forever, so thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither did remember the latter end of it. Now here was the problem in Babylon. The problem in Babylon was not that they hadn't been successful, and that they hadn't conquered, and that they hadn't done things. They'd been able to move forward. The problem was they forgot the reason why they were in the position that they were. The reason that Babylon had been raised up was to fulfill the purpose of God, and they'd forgotten about that portion. They'd remembered the power. They had remembered the prestige, the beauty. They'd taken advantage of it. Those were not the problem. The problem was they'd forgotten the latter things. They forgot about God. And the reality this evening is that a lot of people are forgetting about God. They have all of the things. They have the money that they need. They have the health care that they need. They have all of the things that you could want. everything that you could imagine practically at the stores. They live in a country with a very strong military. There have been almost no fights on the U.S. soil in a very long time. We have everything you could ever ask for, basically, and because of it, we forgot about God. The one who helped America grow as a nation, that helped them win during the colonial wars, that helped them during the War of 1812. And now, we see what's becoming of it. What happened in Babylon? It said in verse 8, "Therefore hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, thou dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children." Here it is. Babylon had overcome. Babylon was comfortable. We don't need God. We are the ones. You know, there is a very interesting wording here. There are two words that I want to focus on for just a moment in verse 8. It's the word I am. It's a very interesting wording because it's the very wording that God used. Moses asked, "Who should I say to the Israelites, sent me?" And God's response is, "Tell them that I am has sent you." We find almost this exact reference happening in John in chapter 8 as Jesus is talking to the Jewish people, and they're talking about these things, and then Jesus makes this astounding statement when he says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am." And the Jews take up stones to stone him because they know that was the reference that God made about himself, that his name was I am. There's a song that I've heard. I've only heard it maybe once or twice. The song is called I Am Unstoppable, I believe is the name of the song, but I think it might just be called I Am. I don't know how you say the artist's name. I think it's S-I-A. It's probably Sia or Sia. It's a woman that sings the song, and it's called I Am. It's a very popular song, actually. It's a pop song, I believe. I'm not entirely certain of the genre. I would assume it's pop or rock. I've only heard it once, and it happened to be on the radio. On a car that I had just rented, it was turned to this station, and I was amazed almost right off the bat by just a couple words in the song. It was very intriguing to me because of the way it was written. Basically, the person had attributed to themselves, "I am unstoppable tonight," I believe is the way that part of the lyrics go. That there was nothing that was going to be able to stop them. And there's really a lot of people this evening that really believe that nothing can stop them. They're doing exactly what they want to do, and there's going to be nothing that will stop them from doing it. Besides, if I were to give probably the main motto of almost every American, that's what it would be. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to do what I want to do, and if you're offended by it, I'm going to do it, and you should just accept it. This is the motto of America. We're going to do exactly what we want to do. Why? Because we have made ourselves in the place of God. We're setting the rules for life. And Babylon had gotten to that point. They had been conquerors. They were convinced that there was no nation in the world that would ever be able to conquer Babylon. This was the strongest nation in the world. This was the wealthiest nation in the world. No one would dare stand up against Babylon. And so they said, I am. And there's no one else beside me. They were so confident in themselves and so confident in their power and their riches and their pleasure that it says they dwelt carelessly. They were given to pleasure. You know, there are a lot of people this evening that are dealing carelessly. They're wasteful with their money. They're hurtful in their relationships. Things that they say are hurtful. They're not very interested in the way that they're raising their kids. They're perfectly happy if someone else raises them, to be honest. They don't care whether or not they're in their lives. They're fully given to pleasure. So much they turn their lives over to drugs and alcohol and immorality. They turn their money over into gambling, into all of these other entertainments and thrills. They're dwelling carelessly. And so we find that our nation is in massive debt, up over 34 trillion, nearing 35 trillion. There's no real slowdown on it, besides the fact of the matter is that we're adding 3 trillion to the debt every year, as everyone has to have the newest car, the newest house, the newest phone, all of the newest things. And don't stop to think at all about the things of God. People are thinking about all the different things they're going to do in their life, different things they're going to do out of the week, and yet they don't take any time to consider God and what God wants them to do. It says, I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. They were so confident that there was nothing in the world that could at all threaten their lives. But verse 9 brings the reality into play. They thought that everything was fine. They're living their life with pleasure. I can do whatever I want. And then verse 9 of Isaiah comes, which brings reality to the whole thing. It says this, but these 2 things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day. The loss of children and widowhood, they shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. You know, I find it amazing how much America has followed the exact Babylonian path. There is currently in our nation an amazing attraction for the things of sorcery and magic. The people dabble in all kinds of these things. They have little amulets that they wear and necklaces and bracelets and all these kind of things. And they have different symbols on them. And many times they are symbols of like earth, wind, and fire, or they're symbols of different stars and things. It's amazing to me the things that we allow in. Of course, over the last about 10 years or so, really it's been a little bit longer than there. I think it's been about 20 years or so now that Harry Potter arrived on the scene. A well-received thing, 8 different books, and it's stemmed with all kinds of sorceries and enchantments, and people are very thrilled with that kind of thing, and they've made movies about it, and people get really into these kind of things. There is a religious group called Wicca. It is basically the group of witches and warlocks, and they talk about energy and these type of things, and it's very common in America today. Besides, it's hit a very high percentage of people. There are shows and TV stations basically dedicated to these things. You'll hear about a show called Charmed, which is basically just about witches. And there's another show, I don't remember the name. I've seen it a time or two in the break room, at least bits and pieces, about these 2 boys that hunt down like devils and vampires and things. These are things that we have going on. Why? Because we became just like Babylon, fascinated with the sorceries and the enchantments. Because when you take God out of things, there's still a desire for the supernatural, for something that's greater than us, because we know there's so little that we have control over. And if there's no greater power than us, then guess what? We're stopped and we're limited at whatever the limitation of man is, which means we're heavily limited. And so people look to something to try to find something greater than themselves. Verse number 10 says this, and we're going to end with this one. It says, for thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge it hath perverted thee. And thou hast said in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. Babylon, main downfall, and it would become their downfall in history, was this very thing, was their rejection of God. They thought they knew all the answers. They thought their wisdom and their knowledge could get them through. And there's a lot of people today that think they have all the answers. We have all the counselors you could want, all the psychologists you could want. You would think for sure, with all the books that have been written and all the counselors that have written, there should never be, ever, a failed marriage. And yet we have more of them than we've ever had. There's more psychologists and counselors than there's ever been. But we have more marriages failing than have ever failed. We have more people committing suicide than have ever committed suicide. We have all the medicine you can want, all the counselors, all the wisdom, all the knowledge, and more violence than we've ever had. I've said it before, but in our attempt to educate, to get rid of crime, all we did was create more educated criminals. And so now they're just better at getting around things than what they used to be. They thought education would solve it, but it hasn't. All the wisdom and knowledge of this world hasn't solved the problem. In today's world, there's more division than there's ever been. There's a great divide in America. People are fighting against people. The workplaces are trying to get more money and falling apart at the same time. It seems the nation's unraveling at the seams. Why? Because we've forsaken God. And what would happen in Babylon is it would unravel at the seams. God's judgment would come true. And one day everything would come to a stunning conclusion. The Medo-Persian Empire would come in and take over in a night. You see, eventually the walls began to crumble. They dwelt carelessly. They left out God. They forgot about everything. They said, I am. There's none else. They had all the pleasures, they had all the money, all the fanfare, all the wisdom and all the knowledge, and it all came to naught. Why? Because they forgot God. The reality this evening is if we leave God out, we're going to have the same result that Babylon had. A great collapse. And so often people wonder whatever happened. You know, I think if you were to take a look over about the last 10 years, you would see the greatest slide you've ever seen in America, ever. Morality has collapsed to a point where it's almost unrecognizable. We have people questioning their very gender, questioning their very relationships. We have presidential candidates that are being shot at. There's presidents that are in such cognitive decline that they have very difficulty even doing their job. And this is the current America. Riots in the streets. You may remember not all that long ago. It wasn't about 4 years ago. There were fires burning in nearly every city. Police stations were being burned down. And you see what happens. It's a very simple thing, what we've done. When you forsake God, it leads to this. It was the same in Babylon. It's the same in America today. The question will be, are we going to turn our lives back to God? And really the question in our own lives is this. Are we going to be like Babylon, like the normal American, really, that takes their pleasure in the things of this world, that says, I can do whatever I want, and I will do, and I know what I'm doing, and I know everything. And in reality, we need God. I challenge you this evening to remember your need for God. The problem for Babylon was, yes, they'd conquered, and they'd won battles, and they'd set up, and they were in their pleasure, but they had forgotten God. And they turned to the enchantments and things of this world. This evening, our responsibility is to remember God, to turn away from all the fake things of astrology and magic and all of that, and put your faith in the one who can truly do wonders and signs and miracles. The Lord God created heaven and earth and sent his Son, Jesus, to die for us. Thanks to all of you come out. Thanks to you view the streams. We appreciate your support. Pray that you have a wonderful evening in the Lord. May God richly bless you. Be prayed up, blessed up, and ready to go up. Have a wonderful night.